We're going to be talking about keep fighting for your marriage. That's what today's about. And so I know a lot of you this weekend, you were at the marriage getaway. We had a marriage getaway in Mobile. And so, come on, it was good. We had a good time. All 4 locations. We had 83 couples out there, and it was just a good time. We've had to kind of rebrand it over the years because a few years ago we used to do some really, really heavy stuff. Like we're gonna go to Mobile and attempt to ruin our marriage and then fix it all in about 6 hours. And so we don't do that anymore. So if you haven't been to a marriage getaway in a few years because you have PTSD from that, just know that it's not the same thing as it used to be. We did some work back in the, anyway, no, so it's a marriage getaway, and honestly, it's about having fun with each other. I think a lot of marriages are in trouble because they just don't know how to have fun together. Seriously, they don't know how to laugh together. They've lost the enjoyment of the relationship between each other, and that's one of the big things about the marriage getaway. So anyway, we started off Friday night, got done Saturday, and I encouraged all of them that were there to be at church today, not watch online. I wonder how many of you are watching online right now. Yeah. Had a long weekend, huh? Okay. So did I. But no, we talked about marriage. We had Pastor Josh and Josh Lipscomb and his wife, Kristen, from Pensacola, from Liberty Church in Pensacola, come over. And they talked about marriage myths. And I'm not going to preach it right now, but it was good. And so, but we hung out. And then we wanted to wrap up this weekend, this morning, talking about keep fighting for our marriage. Y'all listen, God instituted marriage. He created it. He is the creator of it. And the Bible says that it is a picture of Christ in the church. So this is a significant covenant that just is not about, our finances kind of coming together or us getting a house together or maybe having some kids together. It's bigger than even all of those things. It's our relationship with our spouse is representative of Christ and the church. And so we should hold it with high regard. In our culture, marriage is not looked at as sacred. It's just sort of a piece of paper. It's just sort of something that you do, maybe, you can, you don't have to. Hey, we're basically married, we've been living together a long time. Who cares, right? And honestly, that's what culture does. The problem is that's not what the Bible does. The Bible lifts it up. It's a major covenant. And how the family goes, how marriages go, how the family goes, is how the church goes. And ultimately, how the family goes in a nation is how a nation goes. The family is the building blocks of a healthy nation in a lot of different ways. And so the enemy seeks to destroy our identity, our purpose, and he's also seeking to destroy marriage. Marriage, expectations, and through a lot of different ways to destroy marriage and to undermine the family. And so for some of you here, you're not married, obviously, and that's okay. It's okay not to be married. Some of you maybe were married and things didn't work out. So there's no condemnation in that, but we still want to talk about marriage. And for some of you who are single, who one day you want to be married, we talked a lot about this past weekend, your expectations going into marriage is a big deal because you could have the wrong expectations and then marriage doesn't fulfill you. Your spouse isn't your everything. And then all of a sudden you're like, something's wrong with them. No, you thought marriage was going to be something and it's not always that way. And that's why you got to work at it, man. And so maybe some of you are looking to get married one day. Today's one of those days where you can kind of learn about what marriage should be and should look like to prepare yourself for marriage one day, if that's what you feel like God's leading you to. But today, I'm not going to preach. Some of you are like, thank God, man. I'm not preaching today. We've been hearing from John Hendley. He's a man in our church. He goes to our Ocean Springs location. And we've been hearing some of his story the last couple of weeks. And you've been hearing about his wife, Chantel, a little bit. Well, what we did is we sat down, Pastor Stephen DeFazio sat down with John and Chantel and asked them a few questions. And they shared about their marriage. And to be honest with you, we were going to use like a clip of it and maybe kind of post the best of it later online. And we watched it and we were like, we're not going to preach. We're not talking about it. We're going to let them preach today. And so today, you're going to be hearing from John and Chantel about their marriage, what God has done in their life, and what God is continuing to do in their life. And I believe this. I believe some of you, your marriage is in trouble. You're not fulfilled in your marriage, and you think that maybe bailing on it is the best thing. I think you're going to learn today that's not the case. But then you're also going to see how God can restore marriages, relationships, and people, even from the broken places that we come from. And so today I believe we're going to be filled with hope and faith to see God do great things in our church and our relationships. Amen? Amen. So come on, let's check out this video.
Well, good morning, Northwood Church. I am here hanging with the Hendleys, and I like that title. Well, let's call this show "Hanging with the Hendleys" today. Say hey to everybody.
Hey.
Hello.
Come on, we're going to have a great conversation today. As a matter of fact, Northwood Church just came back from our marriage getaway, and we had a great time. And we're continuing in our series called "Keep Fighting." And so today we want to have a conversation around the topic of marriage through the lens of the fact that we should keep fighting for our marriages. And John and Chantel, if you know them, you know they've got an incredible story. Actually, we've been listening to some of John's story throughout the entirety of this series, and it's been really special. But we want to expand on their story and talk to you about some of the things that they've walked through in their marriage, and we think you guys are going to be blessed by that. You guys, you've been to some marriage getaways at Northwood Church, haven't you?
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Have you had a little fun at those?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, good time. We have a good time at those. And one of the ways that sometimes we start our conversations is just trying to get to know one another at a marriage getaway. Hey, when were you married? So tell us, how did you guys meet? When were you married? Give us a little overview on that.
Initially, we met New Year's Eve, 2004. And I really didn't pay no mind to him for, the next couple months or so.
Yeah, I tried to make myself known, and she ignored me.
Yeah.
We were at a prayer night, and I just tried to put myself into her space, and she really ignored me. So I literally kept trying to insert myself into her circle. So I walked up to her one day after church and kind of shoulder checked her. Oh. Yeah, I was just trying to make myself known.
He got my attention then.
So you started your relationship with fighting, and you want to keep fighting, right?
I mean, it wasn't too bad. I
was more like church flirting.
Yeah,
church flirting.
Yeah, it was church flirting. So.
Well,
So you guys obviously decided, hey, let's take this next step. When were you married?
March 31st of 2006.
Awesome.
Yes.
Awesome. So right now you're sitting here on the couch, and you guys look pretty happy to me. Tell me just a little bit about where your marriage is at today.
Well, this is my best friend.
Yeah.
I love him.
I'd rather spend time with her than anybody else.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
it hasn't always been this way, has it?
No.
So you were married in 2006. Why don't you take us back to the beginning and help us understand a little bit about how you got to where you are today?
After we got married, we started living together, of course, and then we found out we were pregnant, 2 months after we got married with Thad, and I changed because hormones, but we didn't really know how to be married. We didn't know what we were doing. I mean, we did premarital counseling with Pastor Van, but I think you really don't know what you're doing until you're doing it, And so we fought a lot. We argued a lot. I'm very stubborn. He's very stubborn. And it was like, I don't know, it was really bad. It was like fireworks all the time. Mm. And he had an anger problem, and he wanted to be right. Even though I was right. No. Even though that, like, in the argument, maybe I was making valid points, or maybe I was right. It was the way I said things, or the way that I came across. And so that made it where he felt disrespected. Mm. And then the way he would respond made me feel like he didn't really love me. We fought a lot like that. It was like every day. Yeah. It was a lot. And then, but we loved each other. We just didn't know how to be married. We didn't have very good examples to go off of. Our church started this series called Love and Respect, and it was like a year-long commitment, and it was once a month. What is there, Friday night? We would go for a few hours, and we go through this book, Love and Respect, and then it ended with a banquet and then a marriage retreat. And I think that's when we first started them. And we really learned how to communicate with that book and that series. And we started applying those things to our marriage, really.
Yeah.
And it helped. We learned that we're on the same team. We're not like, we're for each other. We're not against each other. And the way I was saying things and the way he was interpreting it was completely off. I don't think we really knew what was in our hearts at that time.
Yeah,
Is she right, John?
Yeah, well, we kind of learned how to give each other the benefit of the doubt.
Yeah.
You know, y'all, to know that she's got my best interest in mind,
Right.
and she loves me, not that she's against me and she's my enemy.
Right.
Because I think as people, we tend to think that maybe if somebody disagrees with us or has a different thought that somebody's against us, but I realize she's not against me.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, I'm just really interpreting her wrong.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's probably been pivotal in our marriage, is just realizing, hey, this person loves me and has my best interest. You know, even if she says something that rubs me the wrong way, she's not saying that to tear me down.
Absolutely. A lot of us need to remember that. So you're growing in your love for one another. You're learning to communicate.
Right.
I mean, what's happening?
We're fighting less.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
We started fighting less. He's like, what did you say to me? You said, you did tell me after this that we're going to fight till we get it right. You know? What was that?
Yeah, that's what I said, because I wasn't going to give up.
Yeah, we
I was
weren't
like,
going
we'll
to
fight till we get it right. We'll figure it out.
And then so we started leading together in ministry, children's ministry. We started working with assisting with baptisms and leading married couples small groups.
Yeah, we actually led Love and Respect.
Yeah, we did leave
as
Love and
well.
Respect. It was really good.
Yeah.
And then Labor Day 2013 is when everything just like took a turn for the worse for us.
Okay. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, that was kind of what I talked about in my testimony, that
Yeah.
horrific accident. That it wasn't, it wasn't initially bad.
Right.
It kind of, things compiled on top of that. And eventually I got tired as far as fighting. And I guess the enemy got his claws in me, so to speak.
Yeah. He was pretty angry. It was like you could see the anger. He started withdrawing from me and the children, emotionally more so than anything. Like he was present at times, but he wasn't there. Like you could just tell. He'd rather be anywhere else but there with us. And then you could just see, like at church, he was just filling a spot, like sitting in the seat. He was just filling that spot. He wasn't really getting anything from what was being spoken. We did have some fights, but I think I more withdrew because I was scared. I didn't know what was really happening. I could see he had some unforgiveness, some bitterness, anger, and he started getting depressed. And so I was like, I didn't know what to do.
So
really.
You go from a season of, communicating well, even flourishing in your faith, being used by God, to now experiencing a lot of maybe frustration, pain that you're, experiencing between one another, and then watching your husband go through such a crisis of faith. Yeah.
And like in my mind, it was like, I don't know. In my mind, it was like simple, but in his mind, it was different. To me, I was walking through those things with him, but I wasn't experiencing those things personally. And so in my mind, I was like, you need to let that go. You need to forgive. You need to move forward. You need to fight. You don't need to let this take you down. And he just wasn't there.
Yeah. How bad did it get?
Well, it got to the point where I don't know if he knows this, but he was researching for a divorce lawyer or talking to a divorce lawyer. And that to me got my attention when I saw that. He doesn't know I was looking. See, I knew something wasn't, it was rough. It was rough. We were fighting. We weren't intimate. We weren't, I could tell he just didn't want to be around us, you know? And so I just started snooping in his iPad and just like, what is going on? Is he having an affair? You know, something. And I saw where he was speaking with an attorney about divorcing. And it really upset me because I was like, I knew it was bad. I didn't know what I had done wrong. I thought I did something wrong.
So you start to internalize it.
Right.
Take personal responsibility. Of course, we know he was walking through his own crises.
Right.
I mean, how does this all impacting you spiritually, emotionally?
Well, I felt like there was no hope, and I didn't want to be divorced. Because I felt like, oh, that's failure. You know, here we are, two Christians who, we got married in our church and we felt like we were doing things right. And then all of a sudden divorce is on the table. So, at that time I was in your wife's small group, Amy DeFazio. And then I really kept a lot of this stuff in. So it was around, beginning of 2018. And I just shared with them what was going on and that we needed to pray for John. And then I talked to a really good friend of mine who's the reason why I'm saved. And I told her what was going on. And I said, I just don't have any hope. I said, I'm scared because I don't want to be divorced. I don't want to lose him. And she told me to face my fears. She was like, you need to face that. She's like, what will that look like to you? And I said, failure. And she's like, but what are you going to do if your marriage ends in divorce? And I said, well, I'm still going to serve God. I wasn't going to go anywhere like with my relationship with the Lord because I felt like even though I was struggling internally and I would cry a lot and I didn't feel like I could pray all the time. So like she would pray for me and encourage me. I know Amy prayed for me a lot. And because when you're in that season, it's like you're weak, you're tired. And I felt like all my prayers that I was praying weren't being heard. And I felt like it was getting worse. And I wanted to give up, but I didn't want to give up. Does that make sense?
Yeah. You said you were feeling hopeless and alone, but now you've invited friends into the conversation. How long between the time where John started to spiral and the time that you actually opened up to your friends was it?
Well, I think that was 4 years from probably the time he started spiraling. Because it happened in 2013, but he was still, he was still present. He was still doing really good. And at one point, I remember it was like, I just watched his demeanor in church. And I was just putting that mask on, coming to church, trying to make everything look all right. I didn't want anybody to think anything was wrong. And I remember leaving church one day. I wonder if that was right. Yeah, it was early 2018, late 2017, I think it was. And I looked at him and I said, you don't have to come anymore. And I said, why are you coming? And he said, I'm coming because you want me to come. And I said, are you getting anything? And he said, no. He was just filling a spot. He was on his phone. He wasn't really, nothing was coming through to his heart or his head. And so I was like trying to control the narrative, like, well, we're this happy family. Da, da, da. But really inside, he was dying. I was dying. And I was scared to share anything because I didn't want him to look bad. And so when I told him that and I released him, I felt it was scary. Because I was like, is he going to stop coming now that I did that? That I told him that. And he did.
Yeah.
So, and that really devastated me too. Because I wanted our family to be in church.
Yeah.
And then I started wondering, God, is this really the guy you wanted me to have, for my life? Because I didn't want to, that's not what my life was supposed to look like. We were supposed to be married. We were supposed to be serving in the church, raising our children in the church. We're supposed to be victorious,
Mm-hmm.
And here we were. My husband didn't want to even be in the church anymore.
Yeah.
But I didn't realize that it wasn't me. It was what he was dealing with.
And it wasn't so much the church. I didn't want to be around anybody. I mean, I got to where I was totally withdrawn, where I really did not want to be around anybody.
Well, you even said you were doubting am I really saved? I think you went through that.
Oh, well, yeah. I mean, and I talked about that in my testimony. I mean, I got to the point where I even doubted that God was real.
Yeah.
I mean, I was in the lowest spot of my life.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah. So you guys go from flourishing, learning and growing, to now experiencing the most profound, crises in your life that obviously impacts the entire family.
Yeah.
You're wrestling. You're both fighting through the darkness and the discouragement, and you're now carrying a weight that you never thought you would carry as a married woman.
Right.
I mean, I imagine all of that probably felt almost insurmountable. Like, how are we ever going to see our way through this? You're here now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What changed? What happened?
Well, I mean, God began to draw me.
Yeah.
And he did it through people.
Mm-hmm.
And I talked about that some in my testimony, but my faith started to get renewed.
Yeah.
Like, she was talking about her friend that is the reason she's saved. Her friend's also one of the reasons I'm sitting on this couch.
Yeah.
Because, when I got into that second accident and was laying in there in the hospital, I spoke to God for the first time in a long time.
Yeah.
And her friend texted me the next morning, not knowing what I'd said to God, and it was an answer from God. Because I specifically spoke to God, and she answered. And I know she seeks the Lord, and I knew that was God saying, I'm here, and I love you.
Yeah.
And that renewed my faith.
Yeah.
And there was several other people, Curtis Gillum, just that God began to insert in my life, and I knew it was God drawing me back in, and I knew that he loved me, and then I started to have hope again.
Yeah.
And it was a process. I was still fighting for, probably another year or so. I was still struggling with the anxiety.
Yeah.
But I had hope again. And then in 2020, God healed me completely of my anxiety. And I felt like a new man. Yeah. And things began to really change then. It's like it was, I don't know, just a rapid change.
Well, what's funny about 2020 is we launched OS, or we were launching OS, and then COVID hit, and then we were isolated in our homes for a while, and then we got to start meeting again. And you had said you would like all the leaders at the time to go to the conference, the Encounter.
The Freedom Conference?
Freedom Conference. Yeah. And so I was like, I've been to a bunch of them. I don't really need to go to another one. But I was going to be obedient. And I said, I'm going to go, And so after each session, I was like really searching my heart. Like, is there anything here I need to lay down, And we got to an unforgiveness session. And I can't remember who was speaking. Maybe it was Miss Dorothy. And they were talking about unforgiveness. And then somebody started saying, well, maybe your husband isn't leading spiritually or something in the right way or something like that. And it hit me. I was like, I have unforgiveness against my husband because he made a vow and he was supposed to be our spiritual covering. And even though God had drawn him back, he still wasn't that spiritual covering. Yeah. I mean, he was coming back. Like he was I could see him really seeking God, but he didn't really take that spot.
Wow. So you have some unforgiveness from
Yeah,
all of
I didn't
the
even
pain
realize.
you just walked through,
Right.
which is totally realistic.
Right.
That would be natural to struggle with. John, how do you now enter back into, more intimacy, maybe take some more responsibility in your marriage when for so long you hadn't been? What did that look like for you?
Well, I mean, I did ask for forgiveness because I knew I wasn't the spiritual leader I needed to be. I was a provider. I always provided for my family, and I was always there for my family. Like I would go, I didn't miss the kids' games. Like I was still a dad and a husband, but I did not carry that spiritual mantle, and I knew it, and I was unable to though for a while. Like I was down, man. I mean, I got to the point where I even doubted God was real. But then, coming back, it was tough because I was like, man, I was not the man I needed to be spiritually, and so I just had to own it. And I knew, it was just something I had to walk through because, it was 5 or 6 years. And so, my family's gun shy, I guess you'd say. And I mean, in a sense, I was a little scared. Yeah. It's like, am I going to be all right? You know what I mean?
Yeah. It was like when I started seeing the change in him, I felt like I was walking around on eggshells. Like, is this going to stick? Is this real? I wondered, like, is something else going to happen and it's going to set him back? I was scared for a while because, of course, life happens, things happen. And so I was, I was very nervous.
And by the way, quite a few things have happened, like major things that could derail me. And I
was like, okay.
Cling to God through it and cling to people in the church, to help guide me through it as well. And I think that's one of the worst things we can do is try to fight on our own.
Yeah.
Come on.
I mean, we need each other. Yeah. All right. Because I feel like that's what the enemy wants us to do. He wants to isolate us. And that's what got me before. He isolated me. I did not reach out to people. I tried to fight on my own and things just kept compounding on top of each other. And eventually I just got tired.
Yeah.
And sometimes you need people to hold your hands up for you. Yeah. You get tired and now I'm very quick, to call you or call Curtis. You two guys, y'all are a foundation in my life, as spiritual leaders, I'm quick to go to God, but I also need a friend to talk to too.
Yeah, we all do.
Yeah. We need each other. And
Chantel, you're the part of your experience also was walking through it isolated, putting on a mask, right? And realizing, man, I got to take that mask off and I got to invite friends into this fight so they can lift my arms.
Yeah.
And so both of you have learned that really incredibly important lesson about fighting well through hard spaces in our lives. We need people.
Right. Yeah. I mean, just being transparent, and I think sometimes I've become too transparent at times. I'm like, I need it all back. But I'm me. I'm real. I'm sick of hiding and being scared. And it's funny is one day we were leaving church and I just sat and I was sitting there. He's driving. He doesn't like my driving, so and I said, "Oh my God, I can breathe." I felt like I could not breathe for 5 or 6 years. The fight or flight it comes in, and I was able to process through a lot of stuff. I was able to cry. I was able to breathe. I was able to just sit back and go, whoa.
Yeah.
And he took his place. he just stepped right back into that spiritual lead, but just knowing that I can be under his covering.
Yeah.
And just it's fun, and the way it was supposed to be. And so now I'm not nervous when things arise, because he's the first one to usually just say, we're going to trust God through this, or, so I don't have to say anything anymore.
Well, let me ask you guys, you've got what sounds like, kind of 3 phases in your journey of marriage. Let's look at what was the hardest one, the darker days.
Yeah.
How would you encourage people that are watching right now in the auditorium? Maybe they're watching on social media later. How would you encourage them to fight through those dark days?
Well, the biggest thing is don't feel like you can do it on your own.
Yeah.
Don't feel like you're the only one it's happening to.
Right.
All these are lies to isolate you. Seek out help.
When you do seek out help, though, make sure you're seeking out the right help, because there's a lot of people that if you tell them too much of your business, it's not good. So there's one person we always invited into our marriage, and she's like a mother to me, and she always stayed like middle, like, what is it, Sweden or
neutral?
Yeah. So she always stood very neutral. She always looked at the whole picture. She wasn't afraid to call me out when I was being weird or not thinking correctly. And she always prayed for us. Mm-hmm. And she always was our biggest fan. Like, she's like, I'm always rooting for you guys to make it,
So when you guys didn't have hope to see that there might be a future, she was able to speak that over you and help you remember that there is hope. So that's a great encouragement. We need to fight with community, and we need to know that there's a future to look forward to. What about those who are maybe more like in your early days and they're struggling knowing how to be married? Maybe they've even been married for 20 years, but still feeling like it's brand new and don't know how to live together. Maybe even thriving in the church, leading a ministry like you guys were, but wrestling. What is that? How do you encourage them?
Well, I mean, I still think you go to people and talk to people who have successful marriages, and to say, hey, be honest. Right. Don't be ashamed of your problems.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like you got to lay your pride down.
Yeah.
You can't be prideful and say, I'm saved, so I got to have it all together.
Yeah.
No, you don't. You don't have to have it all together. You know what? Salvation, you're going to walk out your salvation. It's not going to be all roses. You're going to have problems. Life is tough.
Yeah. And
you cannot be ashamed of having problems. You got to lay that pride down and say, hey, I need help.
Yeah.
Well, one thing I learned, even though I kept pointing fingers at him, I realized that I needed to stop doing that. And I needed to stop focusing on him and focus on myself. Like, what can you show me through this season? Like, Lord, I just prayed, like, God, do something in me, change me, because I feel like a lot of time marriages, even though one spouse may be in the wrong, then you're always beating them down like, you're wrong, but you can't do that. You really need to just start looking at yourself, looking on the inside.
And I love that.
Take the focus off of them and then put your focus on God.
Something I've learned as well, just in step with that, like if we would both just focus on ourselves and growing closer to God and being transformed, then we wind up experiencing the benefit of that transformation in each other's lives instead of trying to change each other. Lastly, you're sitting here in victory today. Mm-hmm. You have victory, and it's visible, it's tangible, and it's an inspiration to so many people. To me and my wife, we're inspired by you guys. But still, marriage is requires some fighting.
Right.
Yeah.
You got to keep fighting.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so how would you encourage those who are in a season of success to keep fighting?
Well, I mean, keep feeding into your marriage.
Yeah.
Make priority for each other. That's something we've always did is make time for each other.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of times when you have kids, people lose focus because they focus on nothing but the kids. They don't feed their marriage, and then their marriage slowly dies, and then the kids move out, and they're like, their relationship's dead.
Yeah.
I mean, we had 4 children, but we always made time for each other to feed our marriage. So I think that's one thing I would recommend to people. Always make time for your spouse. I mean, even if it's a little time each week, it's still time that you're feeding your relationship.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And another thing, we do this, but we don't we're going to pray together, but we do pray for each other. And we do worship together. We'll play worship music in the car. And so, we seek God. That's where, as long as you continue to seek God for your marriage, I feel like your marriage will, you're going to go through stuff, but now I feel like we're fighting together and we're not fighting against each other,
Yeah.
We're like a team. We're ready. It's actually much better when you're fighting hand in hand,
Can't believe we wasted all that time fighting against each other.
It's like we're walking through this thing together. Yeah. We got each other's hands. We're going to get through this as a team and not, because it's hard and it's lonely when you're doing it by yourself.
Yeah. We're part of a faith community.
Mm-hmm.
We're a church. And so we want to help people know God, grow in Christ, and go in the power of the Holy Spirit until Jesus returns. And when I think about all the marriages that I've seen that have been most successful, it's those who have been intentional around cultivating a spiritual bond between themselves and their God.
Yeah.
Christ is our anchor. He's our cornerstone. And that's not just true for our salvation. It's true for our relationships. It's true for our marriages. And so you guys are walking that out, and you're a living testimony, and it's powerful, and it's pure, and it's special. And we're just honored to do life with you. We're honored to be part of your story. We're thankful that your testimony is, I believe, maybe even right now in this moment as people listen, breaking chains and inspiring people to think differently about their marriage. So thank you from the bottom of my heart and on behalf of everybody watching today.
I wanted to say something real quick. I'm sorry. I realized looking back now, right before, when it got really bad, if I would have given up, I would have missed out on this, on the sweetness.
I love it.
And I feel like a lot of people give up too soon.
Yeah.
So
how's that for a closing thought? Don't give up.
Come on now. I've been knowing John and Chantel for a very long time, and one thing I love about them, they are just raw. I mean, when you talk to them, you understand what they're saying. They don't put anything up front. They don't try to be something they're not. And this is the second or third time I've listened to this video, and it's just tremendous. Really teaches us everything we need to know. I did make just a few notes. I don't want to speak what they spoke, but just real quick, they talk about love and respect. The Bible says that we're to love and respect one another. Then they had lack of communication. If you don't talk to one another, you can't ever figure anything out. Then they started serving others, even in the midst of all their trouble. Some people wait to serve until they've got everything together, so they never serve. Then they were in desperation, they were in hopelessness, they were in weakness, and they were afraid, and they were faking it. That sounds like a place of defeat. But you know what? Even in our weakness, God is made strong. Then God began to draw John by using people. That's why we need to be connected to people. God healed him as he seeked after God. And then they talked about unrealistic expectations, which I think is one of the greatest downfalls of most marriages anywhere, that we somehow or another expect out of others, which we never would expect out of ourselves. Somehow or another, we feel like if we can just put that on there, and everything's unrealistic. Look, marriage is not always the greatest thing in the world. I hate to tell you that. I've been married, and Jan and I, almost 53 years now. And you keep working. Matter of fact, I found out that the longer you go, the more work it takes. You know, it's not like, oh, wow, we've been there 50 years, we got it down pat. No, we've been there 50 years, and we better get busy about keeping this thing going. And then I love what they said about not fighting alone. Not fighting alone, because one of the greatest tools and weapons of the enemy is to get you isolated. And when he gets you isolated, he will kill, steal, and destroy everything you hope to have. But if you hang in there with God and people, then the abundant life that Jesus promised will be yours. Amen? Come on now.